In his video, Auxiliary Bishop Schneider, an apologist for the usurper of the papacy, addresses Polish Catholics. He uses a well-known method to destroy the truth. He preempts the arguments of the opposition by deliberately telling the truth in a suggestive manner, thereby instilling confidence in Orthodox Catholics. But then he gives a false solution. This is what he also did in his assessment of the heretical declaration Fiducia supplicans. However, this declaration is the corpus delicti that convicts Bergoglio of being a manifest arch-heretic and a usurper of the papacy. He is no pope. Having stated all the true arguments against Fiducia supplicans, Schneider should have drawn an adequate conclusion. The heretical declaration is undeniable proof that Bergoglio is an invalid pope. Therefore, whoever wants to remain in the Church of Christ must separate from the arch-heretic. Instead, Schneider declares that the usurper is a proper pope and demands that this false and demagogic position of his be held by all Catholics. This is a great deception and manipulation.
I would like to greet you and to speak to you some words of encouragement so that you will remain always faithful to the Holy Catholic faith.
How can Schneider encourage believers to remain faithful to the Catholic faith if he speaks in favor of a manifest heretic and thereby denies Catholic teaching? Archbishop Vigano explains why, according to Catholic teaching, Bergoglio is an invalid pope. The Church cannot teach error, nor can her head, the Roman Pontiff, be at the same time a heretical and orthodox, Peter and Judas.
St. Paul says in the letter to the Galatians, "Even if an angel of heaven will come and proclaim you another gospel, do not believe."
But this Bible verse actually says, "If anyone preaches any other gospel, let him be accursed, anathema, excommunicated." Based on this verse from Scripture and tradition, the doctrinal bull Cum ex apostolatus officio states that a manifest heretic, including Pope, is ipso facto excluded from the Church. The fathers and doctors of the Church add, such a pope is no longer a member of the Church and therefore cannot be her head. Schneider deliberately conceals and distorts this truth.
But nevertheless, the Church is indestructible. The Church cannot be overcome by the enemies, because the Church is divine.
Surely, the Church is divine and indestructible, even if it should remain only as a handful clinging to orthodoxy in the catacombs. Those who betray Christ and abandon the truths and laws of God are outside the Church. With his Fiducia supplicans, Bergoglio has insidiously and covertly transformed the official Catholic Church into a New Age anti-church with a sodomite anti-gospel. Schneider, however, imposes on us a pseudo-faith by which we are to believe that Bergoglio's anti-church under the rainbow banner is the true Church of Christ. This is the great trick of Schneider, a false prophet. Archbishop Viganor comments on this issue as follows. The Catholic Church is presently occupied by an extraneous body that superimposes itself on her and obscures her, similar to an eclipse. This extraneous body is not the Church, but the anti-church of the false prophet, and as such it is not possible to be in communion with it. Catholics belong to the Catholic Church, not to its concilia and synodal councils, of which Bergoglio is the head. Are they two churches? Of course not. One is the true church, the other is the deep church, that is, its counterfeit, the anti-church of the Antichrist.
The Peter's office of the Pope is founded by Christ and cannot be overcome by the enemies.
Schneider uses this manipulative statement to prove his demagoguery, as if Bergoglio, a manifest arch-heretic, were a valid pope. Schneider speaks publicly and is not at all ashamed of his ignorance of Catholic teaching. Archbishop Viganor urges, we must understand that the masterstroke of Satan, the sworn enemy of the Church, has occurred by his appropriating authority and abusing the power connected with her, so that his disintegrating action has had all the appearances of at least formal legality. Previously, one could turn to the Holy See to settle doctrinal and disciplinary questions, while today it is the Holy See itself that is the institutional instrument of the heretics who have occupied it.
So therefore, don't lose courage and don't seek your own ways, or don't try to establish your own church or a kind of sect. Don't go.
Schneider is in fact warning again that no one should separate himself from the manifest heretic Bergoglio. Those who would like to separate from him and remain faithful to Christ are denounced by Schneider as those who are supposedly establishing their own church or sect. It is actually through Fiducia supplicans that the Catholic Church has been covertly transformed into Bergoglio's New Age sect. Those who want to be saved must separate from it. Archbishop Vigano explains what the main problem is today when Bergoglio imposes invalid excommunications on true Catholic shepherds. The problem is therefore not whether we are in the Church, but rather whether those who usurp her authority to demolish the Church are part of the Church. They are not part of the Church whose authority they have usurped.
Don't choose your own priest who is completely independent.
True Catholic Archbishop Lenga, who suffers for his faithfulness to Christ, tells Polish Catholics the opposite. He advises the faithful to find a true Catholic priest who is completely independent of the heretic Bergoglio and his structure.
A Catholic priest cannot be autonomous and independent. This is not Catholic.
With this statement, Schneider again aims to keep every priest dependent on the manifest arch-heretic Bergoglio, who denies the basic principles of Catholicism, scripture, and tradition. Archbishop Vigano points out, it is necessary to take note of the usurpation of the Apostolic See, which is not merely vacant but occupied. Bergoglio's illegitimacy also entails the nullity of all the acts of governance and magisterium that he has carried out.
Then seek good bishops who will approve you. Seek, even this could be emeritus bishops.
Yes, it is necessary to seek good bishops who are faithful to Christ, like Archbishop Vigano or Archbishop Lenga. They are not afraid to call the manifest heretic Bergoglio by his true name and thus expose themselves to his invalid punishments. But the real way out of this internal apostasy of the Church is not Schneider's concern.
They must give account to a bishop who is in good stand in the Catholic Church.
Schneider again emphasizes that priests must not separate themselves from Bergoglio and his sect. Therefore, he manipulatively commands that they must be subordinate to a bishop who is in union with the arch-heretic Bergoglio. We ask, which bishops are in good standing and which are not? The fact is that those bishops who submit to the manifest heretic Bergoglio and are in internal unity with him participate in his heresies. They are far from being in good standing before God. They are anathematized by God, according to the Epistle to Galatians chapter 1 verses 8 and 9. Bishops like Archbishop Vigano truly are in good standing because they faithfully uphold Catholic teaching and reject Bergoglio and his heresies that are destroying the Church at the root.
Continue to love the Church, always. Continue to pray for Pope, especially for Pope Francis, every day. Offer sacrifices for his conversion.
With this statement, Schneider declares the arch-heretic, who has excommunicated himself several times, to be the rightful Pope. Schneider thereby contradicts the Holy Scriptures, the teachings of the Church Fathers and Doctors of the Church. If priests stop mentioning the name of the arch-heretic Bergoglio in the Holy Mass, or if they start praying in the Holy Mass not in union with the arch-heretic, but for his conversion, they will be sanctioned.
And when we together, all the Catholics in the world, will together storm heaven, implore God that he will convert Pope Francis, then this will be a miracle, and we will be all grateful to God.
Schneider has completely lost the fear of God. He appeals to God himself in order to defend the usurpation of the papacy by a manifest heretic. He uses pious phrases about prayer to manipulate Catholics and again he gives the impression that the arch-heretic is a valid pope. He even slyly promises an apparent miracle, which he himself neither believes in nor asks for. Schneider makes a mockery of God, of prayer, and of miracles. He makes his utmost effort to keep Catholics dependent on Bergoglio, who has covertly transported them into his sect through Fiducia supplicans. Moreover, it is a matter of public record that Bergoglio has dedicated himself to Satan under the guidance of a sorcerer in Canada. It is absurd to call this usurper the vicar of Christ on earth.
To implore that God will illuminate Pope Francis, that he may recognize his task and that he may again strengthen with all clarity the Catholic faith.
Schneider deliberately ignores the fact that Bergoglio, with all clarity, has destroyed Catholic faith from the very beginning. Archbishop Vigano points out that Bergoglio recognizes only too well his task in alliance with the elites, namely the dissolution of Roman Catholicism into a false religion without dogmas, that is, of Masonic inspiration. Schneider is well aware of this, and he also well recognizes his own task to manipulate the minds of Catholics so that no one will separate from the manifest heretic and his sect. Archbishop Vigano's words apply to Schneider. Those who recognize that, i.e., Bergoglio's authority as valid and legitimate, either do so because they are his accomplices and do not want to be discovered in their own betrayal, or because they do not want to accept the necessary consequences that derive from it. Admitting that one has fallen into a terrible deception requires first of all humility. In this time of deep inner apostasy, God sends a prophetic voice, but there are also false prophets. Archbishop Vigano is a prophetic voice, while Bishop Schneider is a false prophet. Schneider repeatedly defends the arch-heretic and usurper of the papacy. In doing so, he deceives Catholics and plunges them on a false path to eternal destruction. Catholics of Poland, do not be manipulated by Schneider.